I've ridden the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland enough times to be very, very familiar with the phrase, dead men tell no tales. Well, we're not talking about pirates today, but we are going to learn that dead men and dead women do, in fact, tell tales. Archaeologists learn a great deal about human history from the dead, what we used to look like, what we used to eat, who we traded with, how we died, how we dressed, and so much more. So let's dig into some old death on a rotten, decayed, but still very well-preserved episode of Timesuck.
You're listening to Timesuck.
All right, this episode, Timesuck 13, is a listener-suggested episode. Again, special thanks to British archaeologist and timesucker Rebecca Pridmore for not only suggesting this topic, but doing a lot of the research, sending me the links to various fascinating articles on a variety of interesting discoveries of tombs or of ancient corpses. Now, a few weeks after Rebecca suggested this article, I got to thinking about what we learned from the dead because I went on a field trip with my son Kyler with his school, and we went to, I was a parental volunteer, which is always interesting. I feel like a sociologist when I'm around him and his classmates, just like kids are so fucking weird. But we went to this museum, and they had this Egyptian mummy display. Some unknown woman, I want to say it was on loan from a New York museum, but it's Annie is the mummy's name. Maybe you've seen this mummy at a different museum yourself. This was in Spokane at the MAC, Spokane, Washington. And I read about this display about Annie, and it was interesting, like all the things they did to mummies that I'm sure I'd learned before, but I'd forgotten about. Like they had all these urns where they, I guess they used to take the various organs out of the dead person and put like their heart in this urn and their, stomach in this urn and et cetera, et cetera. And each urn had like the top of the urn, which is, basically like a jar, fancy word for jar, had a picture of some Egyptian god on it or like a little carving of like their head, like Ra or something. And I guess, various gods were associated with various organs. And then they wrapped the body. And Annie was kind of a weird mummy where she wasn't royalty. They think, I guess the Egyptians paid special respects to people who died in the Nile. They think it was some girl who just like some 15-year-old, I want to say, like girl who drowned in the Nile. And but anyway, that doesn't matter. I guess they found they wrapped their bodies and all this stuff. And they did one thing that I found very interesting. I guess like when wealthy people died in their tombs, they would find all these remains like food and stuff too. And what they've figured out, what they've learned from the Egyptian dead, is that for like a wealthy person died, and they had their Egyptian tomb, and they had all these like items in the tomb, and I guess the Egyptians believed that like you needed this stuff in the afterlife, like you needed the physical stuff, and I guess they put like various organs in various jars because they thought I guess you were going to somehow reassemble yourself maybe in the afterlife, or at least you needed to access those organs and have them in like good condition. You needed to access your old physical body. And they not only did you needed like I don't know, fucking sword or whatever, like household items in the afterlife, but they also would bring them food, like real meals. So they'd have some servant bring down some meal into the tomb for this mummy to nibble on because you don't want to get hungry when you're dead. That's the last thing you want. Last thing you want is you got your fucking stomach in your jar, in your stomach jar. And you got your brain in your brain jar, and everything's kosher, but you're hungry. You're hanging out in the afterworld with your weird rotten body and your jar organs, but you don't got some tasty victuals to munch on. The shit people believe. I always wonder what 2,000 years from now people are going to look back at us and think like, what are these fucking idiots? Why were they doing that? Sorry if you're a religious person, but I'm guessing that in enough time, all the religions of today are going to be laughed at. That is my thought. If you're a religious person, I'm sure right now you're thinking, well, except for mine, fucking dick. Mine's going to be the one that's going to be found out to be totally true. Well, good luck with that. But yeah, I mean, these people, they believe this stuff. That's what's fascinating to me. Like the ancient Egyptians, they totally believed. I mean, these were people who were able to assemble pyramids and have this civilization that in terms, from what I remember reading about the Egyptians, in terms of architecture and social structure, and, they had libraries and things, like what I want to say in Alexandria, they had this amazing library. Like, they were ahead as far as being civilized far more than a lot of their contemporaries, yet they believed that the dead needed someone to bring them snacks. Man, how much would it have sucked to have been like a servant assigned to that job? Like, you're probably eating some shitty fucking flatbread and, I don't know, goat thigh, something, you're probably super hungry most of the time. I mean, I know a lot of people starved back then, just in ancient history in general. A lot of poor people starved. That's one of the main things poor people did in ancient times was starve, be very hungry, be malnourished, And you're probably bringing, they're not going to be sending like a cracker. If somebody's rich enough to have a tomb and they're rich enough to have meals brought to them, they're not getting, a wheat Triscuit cracker and a small glass of dirty water. Like, they're getting some beer, meat or whatever, some dates and honey, I don't know, some fucking Nile trout or whatever kind of fish were in there, whatever kind of fine meats, they're getting a filet mignon. You're the servant. You're hungry. Your stomach's rumbling. And you're fucking walking a steak, like a perfectly good steak, into this dead person's tomb. And I'm sure a lot of people, the poor people believed what the rich people believed, whatever religion of the day. But there had to have been a few skeptics, though. We're like, fuck this shit. I bet some of those people, servants, would just sit in the tomb and treat themselves, right, to a nice steak. That's what I like to think I would do. After like the 50th time where I come back and I realize that the previous shit I brought is just rotting and not being eaten because it's a goddamn mummy whose mouth is even taped shut. So how are they supposed to eat this stuff anyway? I would think I'd be like, hey man, good news everybody. Your grandpa his appetite is back. He is the fucking healthiest dead eater I've ever seen. Every plate is just polished clean. Unbelievable. But anyway, so this trip to the field trip to my son's school, and then Rebecca's suggestion, just got me thinking about this, and now I'm going to get into some of the articles she sent to me. And the first is this bog bodies. And by the way, this is going to be a little less structured than my past couple of Timesucks. I got to keep it varied to keep myself interested. And I'd like to think that interest will be passed along to you as well. I think the last couple had a big biography chunk, with Bundy and then Elon Musk, or Elon, however you say his fucking crazy South African name. I think it's Elon, whatever, Mr. Musk. It was that Timesuck timeline and going marching kind of forward, very, very linear episodes. We're just going to kind of bounce around on this one, a little loosey-goosey. So one of the things Rebecca sent me was this article on these bog bodies of Northern Europe, and that's and BOG bodies, these people who had died in these peat bogs and had their remains like preposterously well preserved. I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of one of these people. I'm going to have some on the episode description at timesuckpodcast.com if you haven't, just for easy access. But I remember first seeing a picture of one of these in a National Geographic article a while back. And when I was a kid, I have a special love for National Geographics, by the way. When I was a kid, my great-grandpa had a subscription to National Geographic. Had one for years. My great-grandpa John kept every issue, and he gave them all to me. Like, I became interested in this stuff. He was like a guy who just, small-town guy originally from Sweden, immigrated over, made it to Minnesota where he met my great-grandma, made it over to Riggins, Idaho, following his dad, just, I think, construction and sawmill and mining work. Things weren't going well in Scandinavia economically. Brought his brothers over. And he was, lived in this little small town, but fascinated by the world, and he always had, like, almanacs. He had the Guinness Book of World Records every year, which I later made fun of in a bit, just that book. But and he had all these National Geographics, and they're just a really cool magazine. But and he saw that I became, as opposed to reading just random kid books, he thought it was really cool that I got into reading the National Geographics, and you give them all to me. And they really nurtured a curiosity about the world that remains to this day. I mean, they made me want to travel. They helped some dumb kid from a town of less than 500 white people in the middle of the Idaho wilderness understand just how much more of the world there really is than what I could just see around me. I understand geography because of those maps. They were laid out in certain issues, I was always excited to get a National Geographic issue that had a cool map inside it. I dreamed of walking the Great Wall of China, hiking Machu Picchu. I used to actually put some of those maps on the walls where normal kids would place posters. To be fair, I also had a poster of Kathy Ireland and Karl Malone and Jordan, of course. And then, when I was in junior high, they helped me jerk off because those jungle women were often topless, which was more than I could, get my hands on. Is better than the JCPenney Christmas catalog bra section. But that's another topic that many of you probably would not like to hear. But one of these National Geographic issues, it was actually one when I was older. Because of my love, whenever I'd go to like a doctor's lobby or, at the dentist waiting to go in for your appointment, a lot of times they have National Geographic out in the lobby. And those are the ones I always grab as opposed to, Sports Illustrated or whatever. And one time, it's like 2007, 2008, flipping through one of these, and I remember this guy, and I went back and found it online, so I knew what to call it. This Tollund man, Tollund, and he's one of these bog corpses. It's 2,300 years old, incredibly preserved body from a man who died from hanging. And you don't need to be a forensic pathologist to figure out that he was hung, because the remains of the rope are still around his neck, and they are so perfectly preserved. I mean, it looks like a rope you could still use. It's 2,300 years old. Crazy how well this bog dude was preserved. It is a weird look. These bog corpses, they don't have any natural color. Like their bodies are all the same shade of bog brown because of the chemical process that kind of preserves them. They kind of like become part bog themselves. Kind of like a fucking Swamp Thing type transformation in a way. Swamp Thing, familiar, humanoid shape, but composed of plant life. The bog people, perfect human shape of how they died, but a bog-like substance that makes up part of their body. Kind of, it's fucking weird, but it's crazy. Like the detail you can see on these corpses, like I've seen pictures of these bog corpses where you can see stubble on the face. And I'm going to have some of these pictures up on the site as well. The way their hair was styled the moment they die, like you can see like the individual strands of hair, expressions on their face, the fucking lines on their face, from leading hard medieval lives. Like archaeologists could tell from this corpse that he had his nose broken and abdomen sliced open before being hung. Didn't go easily. They rarely did back then. They knew what his last meal was, some type of porridge they were able to recreate and actually taste. It's fucking crazy. And they found hundreds of these guys throughout the years, or guys and gals, these bog people. I mean, they were regular humans, but you know what I mean. I don't want anybody to think like, fucking bog people, huh? I've heard about them. Are they related to mole people? No, there was no bog people. I feel like if there were, they'd be kind of like I'm picturing some kind of dwarf gnome situation. If there was like a bog, but anyway. Okay, so there was the Cheshire, bog man, and this was a body found in Cheshire, England. A guy who died around 60 A.D. And this one, he's so well preserved. They know he was in his mid-20s, stood about 5'7", which wasn't short back then. That was a manly height. If you're some dude who's like listening right now, who's like 5'5", you're probably like, fuck you. Rightfully so. Your height is manly as well. Ish. Yeah. But anyway, he had a trim beard, mustache, brown hair. When I saw the trim beard, I did think, like, how the fuck did dudes trim their beards like in 60 AD? Like, that must have sucked. Like, it's not like they had electric beard trimmers or even like those small, super sharp mustache scissors you can buy. Like, I'm picturing some poor bastard just like hacking at his face with a sharp piece of flint, using his reflection in some, crappy pond for a mirror. Man, fuck that. I don't want that at all. Well, this guy, this Cheshire guy, he was knocked in the head, had his skull fractured. Then, after getting his skull fractured, I don't know how they determine the timeline, but this is what they're saying. And these are, like, I'm getting this from, like, a place like The Atlantic and stuff, not like just Wikipedia. Cord goes around his neck, his throat was sliced, and he was kicked into the bog. They even knew he was kicked in the back by some wound on his back, some death wound. And then nearly 2,000 years later, discovered by some dudes digging for peat in the Lindau Moss. Now, this is fascinating to me about this Lindau Moss peat bog site. And a bog's just like a marsh, basically. Other bodies have been found in this same Lindau Moss over the years, and check this shit out. One of these helped solve a modern murder case. This is a testament to how well preserved these bodies are, because a body was found in the Lindau Moss, 1983. The police at first thought it belonged to a recently murdered woman from the area. By coincidence, it was found just like 1,000 feet from the cottage of a man who was suspected in his wife's disappearance. The police confront this dude with the bog body they just found. Under questioning, he confesses to killing her. A few months later, they realize, shit, our mistake. The body we found was a 2,000-year-old woman. But thanks for confessing. You're still going to be convicted of murder. So great job. Oh man, I don't know any more about that guy who was convicted, but I do know he would fucking hate this week's episode of Timesuck, wouldn't he? Let's talk about some salt in the wound. So I was wondering, that's just crazy to me. So I was wondering, why are these bodies preserved so well? And like as opposed to people who've died in, Arizona or Utah or Pennsylvania, and it's just, Africa, just fucking bones. Why do we got so much more details with these bog people? Well, according to the Atlantic magazine, unlike Egyptian mummies, the bog bodies owe their state to an accident of chemistry. That's their quote, accident of chemistry. I guess these bogs, they were buried in, bogs contain very little oxygen, which inhibits bacterial growth. The most important ingredient for the bog body survival comes from this plant, sphagnum. When sphagnum dies, it releases polysaccharides, which block bacterial metabolisms. This helps organic matter like skin, wood, fur, textiles from decaying. And the bogs also kind of cure the bodies in this process akin to tanning, which I think is why they get the brown look. But this is, and then just a weird little side note, while they're really good at preserving the skin, they do eat away at the bones. So a lot of times they find these remains, and the skin and hair and everything is perfectly preserved on the outside, no bones inside. That's weird. It's just weird. And also the acid in the bog destroys DNA, so they can't get any kind of genetic knowledge from these people. They can find out what they ate when they died and what they look like, but it's like the insides aren't regular insides anymore, and so they can't get any DNA. But there is again, there's a lot of forensic data preserved in the bog bodies. Talks about they were able to find out their social status, medical history, and again the food they ate in their final hours. Like the Tallinn man, his last meal was gruel, some kind of nasty gruel. Some other guy, the Grubal man, ate a porridge made out of 60 different types of plants. That's some fancy fucking porridge, my friend. The old Krogan man, an aristocratic giant from Ireland, lived mostly on meat and dairy, but his final meal was buttermilk and cereal. And I'm guessing cereal, some kind of just basic grain. I don't think he's having Lucky Charms or some shit. A little before General Mills' time. The Lindau man had an upmarket, is how they describe, an upmarket meal of griddle toasted flatbread. That sounds pretty good. Griddle toasted flatbread. Back in 60 AD, man. They were toasting some shit on the griddle. And he had a little small addition of mistletoe pollen. That's a cute phrase, mistletoe pollen. Sounds fucking terrible. You want some pollen on your flatbread? No, I don't. Never had pollen, but I have no interest in trying it. Some of these people had finely manicured hands, wore elaborate hairstyles, kind of indicated their rank as freedmen or warriors. But also it says in the Atlantic, an unusual number of the bog bodies suffered from physical deformities. And I bet that was just a result of living in an age when there was no Western medicine. Like some of these, they said deformities were just fairly minor, like cauliflower ear. So maybe they were wrestling. Curved spines, diseased joints, which would have made walking difficult. Other abnormalities were more pronounced. Says a survey of bog body research turns up a dwarf, a giant, a man with an extra set of thumbs. One researcher thinks this might be significant, as far as the high percentage of these people that had abnormalities were found, because he thinks, maybe, quote, visually special people, end quote, may have been deliberately targeted for their uniqueness and possibly spiritual power. Like maybe they were sacrificed because they look different. I think maybe just a lot of people were fucked up back then, because they didn't have, vitamins and good medicine. That's what I think. I don't know if anybody else in the science community agrees with me, But I personally I can't stand it. Little side note here, I can't stand it when people shit on modern medicine and act like homeopathic stuff from the Dark Ages is better. Maybe sometimes, sometimes, situationally, but you're kidding yourself. You're fucking kidding yourself if you think you'd be healthier living back in time. You probably have a limp, because you broke your leg like a lot of people do, but there's no real doctor who said it. Instead, you got Olaf, the town blacksmith, or maybe Igor the Wise. You get some dumb shit rubbing bark on your shin and trying to pray it back together, or something else stupid. Maybe they put some leeches on your ankle, maybe bleed your leg back together. Or you'd have polio, or rickets, or scurvy. Scurvy sounds kind of fun. You have scurvy, or some other ailment that could easily have been prevented today by the occasional Flintstone vitamin. Another thing the bog bodies make clear is that mistreatment they suffered in death was extreme as it was varied. The Harald Skar, I can't pronounce half these words, woman was killed with a garrote. The Yid girl was strangled with her own girdle. Ooh, fuck, man. Talon man was hung. Some teenager from northern Germany was hogtied before his death. A lot of different bodies had their throats cut. One girl was drowned, and then her arm was hacked off. What the fuck? Barros woman was scalped, her face crushed, and her right leg broken. Oh, she must have did something serious to piss somebody off. The old, or been accused of being a witch and been a totally cool person who just, fucking weirdos of the day threw something her way. The old Krogan man was hit with a barrage of blows, most likely from an axe, enough to sever his head and cut his body in half. God damn. Why would you ever want to live in medieval Europe? That sounds like it sucks. I love The Princess Bride, that movie, but I don't think they accurately portray the time. Not that movie was supposed to, by the way. I'm not a fucking. I know it's a Mel Brooks movie. Okay. So again, the lesson here is that it would suck to go back in time. That's what I'm taking from this. There's no stats available for how often a brutal death occurred in medieval Europe, but I feel like from all the stuff I've read over the years, it seems like it's about 1 in 2. Or maybe somewhere between 1 in 2 and 1 in 1. Jesus. And the violence, I guess, in these bodies continued after death. Some of the bodies had their arms pierced. Willow branches were drawn through the wound. Others had wooden stakes through the knees. Oh, man. Somebody wrote that these restraints may have been a way of taming the dead, pinning the ghost to the spot where they died. Yeah, okay, that sounds like that would do the trick. Some of them had part of their head shaved, some of them buried naked, some of them wrapped in only a shroud. In addition to everything else was done to them, the old Krogan's nipples were sliced. And I guess this made special significance. According to ancient Irish traditions, sucking a king's nipples was a way of showing him submission. You fucking hear that? Sucking an ancient Irish king's nipples was a way of showing him submission. I thought this was just fucking nonsense, and I did more Googling on this, and there was a variety of articles that talks about this happened. That's what ancient Irish kings did. Can you fucking imagine that? You say you're Laurel, Baron McCormick, but it has been 3 moons since you suckled upon my teat. I will send soldiers to defend your castle, but not until you've licked and nibbled upon my right nipple while Lord O'Reilly cuppeth my balls and the Earl of Dublin slightly strokes the king's cock. I don't know what that accent was, but what the fuck? I feel like this is something Trump would want to bring back. Maybe make Pence suck on his nipples a bit before briefings. You say you're with me, Mike, but I haven't had a tremendous suckling in weeks. Anywho, no one knows exactly why these people were killed. We've learned a lot about what medieval Europeans ate, looked like, what they wore, etc., though, from these bog bodies. I think that's pretty cool shit. There were some more articles Rebecca sent me. One was that Hebrew University archaeologists uncovered a 12,000-year-old grave inside a North Israel cave that was so well preserved they were able to reconstruct the type of funeral that took place. This woman was laid on a bed of specially selected materials, including gazelle horn cores, fragments of chalk, fresh clay, limestone blocks, sediment, tortoise shells were placed under and around her body, 86 in total, seashells, an eagle's wing, leopard's pelvis, forearm of a wild boar, even a human foot were placed on the body of this mysterious, roughly 4.5 foot tall woman. Atop her body, a large stone was laid to seal the burial space. How do you like to be the funeral director back then? Man, that would suck ass. All right, Abraham, we're having Judith's funeral on Friday, and for starters, we're going to need 86 turtle shells. Oh, ooh. Man, I'd love to help you, Abel. I just got a shipment of about 50 turtle shells in from my turtle guy in Crete. Is that going to cut it? Who the fuck do you think my mom is, Abraham? Some common 50 turtle shell having tavern whore? You get those 86 fucking turtle shells, you son of a bitch. And I'm going to need a leopard pelvis, okay? All right? Okay, I get it. I apologize. I get it. But yeah, I just sold my last leopard pelvis this morning. I can give you a tail and 3 leopard feet. You get that fucking pelvis and a wild boar forearm, and you throw in a human fucking foot, or I will bury you with my foot up your lazy ass. And just because you pissed me off, we're going to do all this deep inside a fucking cave, okay? Yeah, that was an accurate portrayal, you guys. That was like as if I had a window into the past and was overhearing an actual conversation. That was, I'm sure, incredibly accurate. But yeah. So based on that, they found out how this woman was kind of buried and how her funeral went. You know, the stages of laying down this and then placing the turtle shells and all that, and I guess this woman was buried alone, so they think she must have been some kind of shaman, and maybe the tortoise shells and stuff had religious significance. I don't know. Maybe she just really liked fucking turtles. All right, the last one I'm going to talk about in this time suck is in 2015, archaeologists in Greece discovered a tomb that would make Indiana Jones giddy. They found an undisturbed burial tomb of a 3,500-year-old Greek Mycenaean warrior. Bones, roughly 1,400 items / clues of what life was like back then. Gold rings, silver cups, even a bronze sword with an ivory hilt. That is amazing. Can you imagine just fucking finding that in the dirt? You know, I dreamed about that shit as a kid, uncovering something like that in my yard. Turns out not a lot of ancient Greek stuff in central Idaho. Not a lot of... sometimes you find some old Mountain Dew cans. It's about as good as it gets. But yeah, 2 researchers from the University of Cincinnati working on this excavation estimate that 3/4 of the finished grave's goods came from Crete, which was a 2-day sail to the south from this burial site, rather than local sources. And that's how people learn stuff about the past. Like, that's how they learned that, you know, they were definitely trading with other civilizations. And I know they already knew that by the time they got to this tomb, but, you know, that's how it's definitive proof, you know? 35 is not just like a story written by somebody back then. It's goods that are definitely... You know, they can carbon test them or however they fucking figured out that are from other places. So they were definitely trading. And that's badass, man. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. This dude was a sword-carrying warrior, too. Can you imagine? Can you imagine really being that? Back in time, fighting with a fucking sword? I can't imagine today fighting with a gun and trying to kill somebody 100 yards away. That seems so personal. And just taking another human life, you know, that's such a big thing. I have so much, you know, respect for soldiers who were able to do that to defend their country. But I mean, even like today's military, yes, occasionally I'm sure there's hand-to-hand situations, but by and large, it's at a distance. Can you imagine where pretty much everything was fucking right in your face? Like when your job is to go hack people to death with a sword who are trying to hack you to death with a sword? God, ancient people had a lot tougher than we do today. They really do. But, wow. Well, I hope you found all this stuff as fascinating as I did. Let's now hit the highlights with some top 5 takeaways.
Timesuck top 5 takeaways.
Top 5 takeaway number 1. If you can't afford a taxidermist to preserve your beloved pet or family member, just find a marshy bog to throw them in. Let them soak for a couple years, and then bam! Nana is a bit browner than you may remember, maybe a bit wet, but she looks just like she did in life, old and miserable and judging you. Number 2, bogs were an awesome place to go in ancient Europe if you wanted to be severely beaten, tortured, and hung. Apparently that was quite the thing to do back then. Number 3, ancient Irish kings made their subjects suck on their royal nipples. Oh my God! And check this out. I'm gonna give you some extra info that I didn't give you earlier that I found. Sometimes they would cut off while they were alive a royal descendant's nipples. They would cut off the dude's nipples to make him ineligible for kingship, because you can't be a fucking king in ancient Ireland unless you got some proper nips to suck on. No one's sucking on a scar. That's peasant shit. Unbelievable. If that really is true, that's one of the most entertaining historical facts I've ever heard. Number 4, 12,000 years ago, at least one ancient Israeli woman was super into turtles, like big time. And people were a lot more casual about killing turtles back then. And number 5, while being buried in an elaborate tomb complete with a fancy bronze sword seems super cool, being an ancient Greek who had to kill people with a sword seems super shitty. Be glad, be so very glad that we no longer live in the age of sword fighting.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
All right, well, thank you again for going on another Timesuck adventure with me. And thanks to Rebecca for that topic. That was fun. And a lot of you have been sending me topics, which I'm so appreciative of. Please don't feel bad if I don't make it to yours. And if I've already done one of yours, it'll probably be a long, long time if I do another one. There just aren't enough weeks in the year to do them all, and I save a bunch of weeks for myself. I alone lately have been thinking about 5 new Timesucks a week. There's just so much shit out there that I find fascinating, but keep sending them in. I mean, some of them are definitely topics that I find amazing that I would have never discovered on my own. So I really appreciate this kind of relationship we're all forming through this podcast. It's awesome. I hope to really kind of grow and expand this whole situation over the next few years. And go to timesuckpodcast.com for pictures of a lot of the stuff I talked about in this episode. And that is all for now. Stay curious. And have a great week, everybody.